This isn't easy to admit, but at 70 I realized something painful. I was only called when someone needed something, not because they missed me, not because they cared how I was doing, just convenience. A ride to the doctor, help watching the kids, advice when things went wrong. Then silence, long, aching silence. I told myself it was nothing, that people get busy, that it wasn't personal. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't part of their lives. I was a tool in their drawer, taken out when needed, put away when done. And when that truth finally settled in, it broke me. Before we dive in, if this touches something in you, stay with me. You're not alone in this feeling, and together we'll find our way through it. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, so slow I almost missed it. At first, I was just happy to get a call, even if it was about borrowing something, needing help, asking a favor. I felt useful. I told myself, at least they thought of me. But then I started noticing things. They never called just to talk. They never asked how I was, unless it led to a question about what I could do for them. I began keeping track of who reached out and when. My messages would sit, unread, unanswered, until they needed something. Suddenly, I mattered again, but only when it was convenient. Holidays came and went. My phone stayed quiet. No knock at the door, no cards, no shared meals. I remember one birthday. I waited all day, thinking, surely someone will remember. But the hours passed, and so did the hope. I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was being sensitive. So I tested it. I stopped texting first, stopped calling to check in, stopped reminding people I existed, and the silence that followed, it was deafening. That's when I knew. They remembered me when it was useful, not because they valued me, not because they cared. I wasn't part of their rhythm. I was just a pause they took when it served them. And the hardest part? It wasn't anger I felt. It was grief. A quiet kind of grief. The kind that settles in your chest and makes everything feel heavier. I started to wonder, if I disappeared completely, would anyone notice? Would anyone care? That question haunted me for a long time, and even now saying it aloud makes my voice tremble. Because it's not just about being forgotten, it's about realizing you were never truly seen. There's always a moment when everything that's been quietly hurting you finally speaks loud enough to break something inside. For me, it was my 70th birthday. I didn't expect a party. I didn't expect balloons or a cake or a grand gesture. But I thought, maybe a call, a simple message, a voice saying, "I'm thinking of you today." But the day came, and the hours passed. Morning turned to afternoon. Afternoon faded into evening, and the phone never rang. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the small slice of cake I'd bought for myself the day before. Just in case. One candle. No singing. Just the flicker of a flame. And the silence of a house that had never felt so empty. That moment hit me hard. Not because I was alone, but because I realized I'd been holding on to people who had let go of me a long time ago. I had spent years reaching out, remembering their birthdays, showing up when they needed someone. I answered their late-night calls. I picked up the pieces when they were broken. I made room for them, even when it meant shrinking myself. But when it was my turn to need, no one came. And sitting there with that candle slowly melting, I felt something shift. It wasn't rage, it wasn't even sadness. It was clarity. I wasn't invisible, I was just overlooked. By choice. And that's what broke me. The realization that I had made excuses for people who never made time for me. That I had mistaken usefulness for love. That I had traded my presence for their convenience. I cried that night, not because of the loneliness, but because of the truth I had spent so long avoiding. I had been chasing connection in places where I was only ever tolerated, not cherished. That was the moment I stopped lying to myself. No more pretending they cared. No more hoping for a message that wouldn't come. No more stretching my heart to fit into spaces that had no room for me. It hurt. It really did. But sometimes, the moment that breaks you is also the moment that sets you free. After that birthday, after the candle burned down and the silence settled in, something in me began to change. Not quickly, not all at once, but something shifted. I woke up the next morning, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't check my phone hoping for a late message. I didn't scroll through names wondering who I should reach out to next. I just sat with myself, and for a while it was uncomfortable. Because when you've spent your life making sure everyone else is okay, you forget how to be okay with yourself. But I started asking questions I had never dared to ask before. Why am I fighting to stay in people's lives when they've shown me they're fine without me? Why am I chasing conversations that only exist when I start them? Why do I keep pouring from a cup no one ever bothers to refill? Those questions weren't easy. They stripped away a lot of stories I had told myself for years. Like, they're just busy. They'll come around. Maybe I need to try harder. But no. Sometimes people drift. Sometimes they take. And sometimes they just don't see your worth. And none of that is your fault. So I made a choice. A quiet, powerful choice. I stopped chasing. I stopped checking in just to prove I cared. I stopped stretching myself thin just to stay close to people who never met me halfway. And it was scary. There were days I stared at the silence and felt it press in on me. Days when I wondered if I'd done the right thing, if I had pushed too hard by finally pulling away. But slowly, the silence became something else. It became space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to feel again, without waiting for someone else to validate those feelings. I started taking small walks in the mornings. No phone, no pressure, just me. I cleaned out drawers, not just the physical ones, but the emotional ones too, letting go of memories tied to people who never truly stayed. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and let the sun warm my skin, and I told myself, you are enough, even when no one is watching. And something surprising happened. I didn't feel as lonely anymore, because I realized being alone isn't what breaks us. It's feeling unseen, even when surrounded. And when I stopped fighting for space in other people's lives, I found space in my own again. Once I stopped trying to fit where I didn't belong, I discovered something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not the empty kind. Not the echo of a quiet room or an unanswered message, but the stillness that comes from no longer carrying the weight of proving your worth. At first, it felt unfamiliar, almost lonely in its silence, but slowly, it became comforting. I began waking up without dread. No expectations, no waiting for someone else to remember me. Just me, and a new kind of freedom. I started spending time with myself in ways I never had before. Morning walks turned into slow strolls through the neighborhood, where I noticed the changing trees, the chirping birds, the kindness in strangers' smiles. I took a class at the community center. Nothing fancy, just a beginner's painting group. No one knew me there. No one expected anything from me. And yet, they listened. They laughed with me. They asked how my day was, and meant it. It reminded me that connection isn't about quantity. It's about sincerity. I also joined a small book circle at the library. It wasn't about the books, really. It was about being in a room where no one wanted anything from me, just my presence. That was enough. But the most important connection I rebuilt was with myself. I wrote in a journal again. I made tea without rushing to answer the phone. I sat under the sky and let myself be exactly who I was in that moment. Not someone's solution, not someone's helper, just me. And I began to love that version of myself. Not because she was useful, not because she was always available, but because she was worthy. Worthy of rest, worthy of quiet joy, worthy of being seen, even by her own eyes. I used to think peace meant being surrounded. A full house, a full calendar, a phone that never stopped ringing. But now I know. Peace isn't found in the noise. It's found in the pauses, the slow mornings, the honest moments. It's found in being seen, truly seen, even by just one real soul. And sometimes that soul is your own. You don't need a crowd to feel whole. You just need truth and a little courage to stop begging for the crumbs and start sitting at your own table. These days, life feels lighter. Not because everything's perfect, not because I'm constantly surrounded by people, but because I stopped carrying the weight of being what everyone else needed and started being who I needed. There's a quiet strength in that, in waking up and choosing peace over performance, in no longer asking, "What can I do to be loved?" but instead asking, "What can I do to love myself today?" I still have moments when the silence creeps back in, when I remember birthdays I used to celebrate for others, or scroll past photos of people I once called family, now living lives that no longer include me. But I no longer see that as my failure. I see it as growth. Some chapters close without warning. Some people exit without explanation. And sometimes it's not about fault. It's about fit. You outgrow the role they put you in. You rise from being the convenience they leaned on to the truth you live in. And that truth, it's this: you are not too much. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are allowed to want more than being someone's backup plan. You are allowed to walk away from the ones who only remember you when they need something. You are allowed to choose yourself and mean it. So if you've ever felt like just a convenience, if your calls go unanswered until there's a favor on the other end, if your heart has felt heavy with being needed but never truly wanted, please hear this. You are not alone. So many of us carry this quiet ache, wondering if anyone truly sees us, if anyone would notice if we just stopped showing up. But the healing begins when you stop chasing answers and start creating your own peace. Because real connection, real love, it doesn't come from being useful. It comes from being known. And that kind of connection starts with you. Have you ever had to let go of one-sided friendships? What helped you heal? I would love to hear your story in the comments. Because your story matters. Your voice matters. And you deserve to be seen.